My name is Sarah. I'm 32 years old. And 3 months ago, my younger sister Emma thought she could humiliate me at my own birthday party by announcing her engagement to steal my spotlight. What she didn't expect was for her fiancé to stand up, walk over to me, and say, "Sarah, I need to tell you something that's going to change everything." If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, if you've ever been the one they dismiss while elevating someone else, then you're going to want to hear this story. Because what happened next didn't just expose my sister's true character, it revealed a secret I'd been keeping for 3 years that left my entire family speechless. Before we dive into this, hit that like button if you've ever been underestimated by people who should support you, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. I love connecting with viewers from around the world. I promise you, by the end of this story, you'll understand why sometimes the best revenge is simply being yourself, authentically and unapologetically. But first, let me take you back to where this all began. Growing up in the Morrison family meant living in Emma's shadow, and I accepted that reality early on. She was 3 years younger than me, but from the moment she could walk and talk, she commanded every room she entered. Emma had this magnetic personality, blonde, bubbly, and blessed with the kind of effortless charm that made adults melt and peers gravitate toward her. Meanwhile, I was the quiet one, the responsible one, the one who got good grades without fanfare, helped with household chores without being asked, and never caused any drama. In family photos, Emma would be front and center with that 1,000-watt smile, while I stood slightly behind, content to blend into the background. Our parents, Linda and Robert, weren't malicious people, but they definitely had their favorite. When Emma wanted to try dance classes, they enrolled her immediately and drove her to competitions 3 hours away every weekend. When I expressed interest in coding camps during high school, they said it was too expensive and probably not that important anyway. The pattern continued through college. Emma chose communications at State University because it was fun and social, while I worked 2 part-time jobs to afford computer science classes at the local community college before transferring to finish my degree. Emma's college experience was documented extensively on social media: sorority parties, spring break trips, and a steady stream of boyfriends. Mine was spent in computer labs and libraries, building something that none of them understood or valued. After graduation, Emma moved back home to figure things out, which mainly involved working part-time at our cousin's boutique and going out with friends most nights. I landed an entry-level position at a small tech company called Data Flow Solutions and moved into a tiny, studio apartment across town. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. The family dinners during this period were particularly painful. Emma would regale everyone with stories about her latest dating adventures or some minor achievement at the boutique, while I would mention a successful project deployment or a new programming language I'd mastered, only to be met with polite nods and quick subject changes. "Sarah's always been so technical," Mom would say, when relatives asked about my work, with the same tone she might use to describe a peculiar hobby. "We don't really understand what she does, but she seems to enjoy it." What would sting the most was watching Emma receive praise for things I'd been doing quietly for years. When she helped our elderly neighbor Mrs. Patterson set up her new smartphone, the family acted like she'd invented technology itself. I'd been providing free tech support to half the neighborhood for 3 years, but somehow that never warranted a mention. The thing about being underestimated is that it gives you incredible freedom to grow without scrutiny. While my family was focused on Emma's every move, I was building something extraordinary. Within my first year at Dataflow Solutions, I'd impressed the senior developers enough to be assigned to high-level client projects. I wasn't just writing code, I was architecting entire systems for Fortune 500 companies. My direct supervisor, Marcus Chen, pulled me aside after my annual review and said something that changed my trajectory completely. "Sarah, you have a rare combination of technical brilliance and business intuition," he told me. "Have you ever considered consulting independently?" The idea terrified and excited me in equal measure. But Marcus introduced me to his network, and within 6 months, I was taking on freelance projects for major corporations while still maintaining my day job. The money was unlike anything I'd ever imagined. My first independent contract with a pharmaceutical company paid $47,000 for 3 months of work, more than I'd made in my entire first year at Dataflow. I was careful not to change my lifestyle dramatically or suddenly. Instead of moving to a luxury apartment, I stayed in my studio and invested every extra dollar. I maxed out my 401k, opened a Roth IRA, and started building a substantial emergency fund. I bought a reliable used Honda Civic instead of something flashy. To my family, I looked like the same struggling young professional I'd always been. But behind the scenes, my client list was growing exponentially. I was the hidden architect behind the customer management system for a retail chain with over 800 locations. I designed the inventory tracking software for a major automotive manufacturer. My code was running on servers in companies whose names everyone would recognize, but I never mentioned any of it at family gatherings. The psychological impact of this secret success was profound. While my family continued to treat me like the overlooked daughter with the computer job they didn't understand, I was earning more in a month than Emma made in half a year. I was being courted by headhunters from Google, Amazon, and Microsoft. I was speaking at industry conferences and had been featured in 2 major tech publications. Yet I showed up to family dinners in the same modest clothes, driving the same practical car, living in the same small apartment. Part of me enjoyed the anonymity. It felt like wearing a disguise to infiltrate a world that had never quite accepted me. But another part of me was slowly building resentment at being so thoroughly dismissed by the people who should have been celebrating my achievements. The breaking point started forming during Emma's 27th birthday party at our parents' house. She'd just started dating someone new, a guy named Jake, whom she'd met at a coffee shop, and the family was already treating him like the second coming. Jake was handsome in that conventional way Emma always preferred. Tall, athletic, with perfect teeth and an easy laugh. During dinner, the conversation naturally centered around Emma's new relationship and her exciting job developments. She'd been promoted to assistant manager at the boutique. When someone asked what I'd been up to, I mentioned that I'd just finished a project that would improve supply chain efficiency for over 2,000 retail locations nationwide. "That's nice, honey," Mom said absently before turning back to Jake. "So tell us about your family. What do your parents do?" I watched Jake politely engage with questions about his background while my accomplishment, something that would save a company millions of dollars annually, was dismissed as casually as if I'd mentioned doing laundry. But what I noticed was that Jake kept glancing at me during the conversation, with an expression I couldn't quite read. After dinner, while everyone was gathered in the living room, Jake approached me in the kitchen where I was helping clean up. "Sarah, can I ask you something?" he said quietly. "What you mentioned about the supply chain project, that sounds incredibly complex. What kind of systems are you working with?" I was so surprised that someone in my family's orbit was actually interested in my work that I found myself explaining the technical details. Jake listened intently, asking intelligent follow-up questions that revealed he had a much deeper understanding of technology than I'd expected. "You're talking about enterprise-level architecture," he said, clearly impressed. "The kind of work that usually requires teams of senior developers. You're handling this solo?" "Mostly, yes," I admitted. "I have a small network of specialists I collaborate with for certain components, but the overall design and implementation is mine." Jake stared at me for a moment. "Sarah, do you realize what level you're operating at? This isn't some small business website. You're doing work that Fortune 500 companies pay consulting firms millions for. It was the first time anyone in my family's presence had truly understood the significance of what I did. The validation felt overwhelming, but also dangerous. I quickly changed the subject and returned to the living room, where Emma was showing everyone photos from a recent weekend trip. Over the following months, Jake became a regular presence at family gatherings, and each time he sought me out for conversation. It started innocently enough. Questions about technology, industry trends, or current events. But gradually, our discussions became more personal and more frequent. I learned that Jake had a master's degree in business analytics from Northwestern and worked as a data scientist for a mid-sized consulting firm. He was intelligent, thoughtful, and refreshingly genuine compared to Emma's usual boyfriends. More importantly, he treated my professional achievements with the respect they deserved. I looked up some of those companies you mentioned, he told me during one family barbecue. Sarah, you're not just successful, you're operating at an elite level. Why don't you talk about this more? Because they don't want to hear it, I said simply, nodding toward where Emma was holding court with Mom and our aunts. It's easier to be invisible than to compete for attention I'll never win anyway. Jake frowned. That's not fair to you. Or to them, honestly. They don't know who you really are. Maybe I prefer it that way, I said, though I wasn't sure I believed it anymore. The problem was that I was developing feelings for Jake, despite my best efforts not to. He was engaged to my sister, but our intellectual connection was undeniable. I found myself looking forward to family events just to talk with someone who understood my world. I was careful never to cross any lines, but the emotional intimacy was growing dangerous. I could tell Jake was struggling with something too. Sometimes I'd catch him watching me with an expression that seemed almost painful. During conversations, there would be moments of charged tension that we both pretended not to notice. The guilt was eating at me, but I couldn't seem to stop myself from craving those connections. The situation reached a crisis point during Emma's engagement announcement. She'd planned it for weeks. A surprise reveal at what she told the family was just a casual Sunday dinner. She'd even coordinated with Mom to make it special, requesting her favorite meal and asking Dad to open a bottle of the good wine. But Emma had made one crucial miscalculation in her planning. She'd scheduled her engagement announcement for March 15th, my birthday. I don't think it was intentional malice. Emma had always been somewhat self-absorbed, and my birthday had never been a major family celebration anyway. While hers involved parties, special dinners, and elaborate gifts, mine typically warranted a phone call and maybe a gift card. So when she picked the date for her big announcement, I doubt it even occurred to her to check the calendar. Still, when I walked into our parents' house that Sunday evening expecting a quiet birthday dinner and instead found extended family members, flowers, and an obvious celebration setup, the irony wasn't lost on me. Once again, Emma's moment would eclipse mine, even on the one day that was supposed to be about me. The engagement announcement played out exactly as Emma had orchestrated. During dessert, Jake stood up and tapped his glass to get everyone's attention. The family quieted expectantly, and Emma practically glowed with anticipation. I wanted to gather everyone together tonight because Emma and I have some news to share, Jake began, but his voice sounded strained. Emma has been an incredible part of my life for the past 8 months, and she's an amazing person who deserves all the happiness in the world. He paused, and I noticed his hands were shaking slightly. Emma was beaming, already extending her left hand slightly as if preparing to show off a ring. But I need to be honest with all of you about something, Jake continued, and the tone of his voice made the entire room go silent. Over the past few months, I've realized that I've developed feelings for someone else. Someone who challenges me intellectually, who inspires me professionally, and who I believe I could build a real future with. Emma's face went from glowing anticipation to confused concern. Jake, what are you saying? Instead of answering her, Jake turned and looked directly at me. "Sarah, I need to tell you something that's going to change everything." The room erupted. Emma shot to her feet so fast her chair toppled backward. Mom gasped audibly. Dad dropped his fork with a clatter that seemed impossibly loud in the sudden chaos. "Are you kidding me?" Emma shrieked, her voice reaching a pitch I'd never heard before. "Are you seriously doing this at our engagement dinner? You're choosing her?" Jake walked around the table toward me, and I felt like I was in some sort of out-of-body experience. This couldn't be happening. Not like this. Not at my family dinner table with everyone watching. "Sarah," Jake said quietly, stopping a few feet from my chair. "I know this is unexpected, and I know the timing is terrible, but I can't pretend anymore. I've fallen in love with your mind, your integrity, your quiet strength. I've fallen in love with who you really are." Emma was crying now, but they were tears of rage rather than heartbreak. "Who she really is. She's a nobody, Jake. She lives in some terrible apartment and works some boring computer job that none of us even understand. I'm the one you proposed to. I'm the one you've been planning a future with." "Actually," Jake said, still looking at me, "that's not entirely accurate." And that's when he said the words that changed everything. "Sarah, I know about Pinnacle Consulting." The blood drained from my face. Pinnacle Consulting was the name I'd registered for my independent consulting business 2 years earlier. It was the corporate entity through which I handled all my major contracts. Only a handful of people knew that connection, and Jake definitely shouldn't have been one of them. "What's Pinnacle Consulting?" Dad asked, looking confused. Jake reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. 3 months ago, my company hired a consulting firm to overhaul our entire data infrastructure. The project was worth $340,000, and it was the most impressive technical work I'd ever seen. When I looked into the company, all I could find was that it was run by someone named S. Morrison. My heart was pounding so hard I thought everyone in the room could hear it. It wasn't until I started spending time with Sarah that I realized S. Morrison and Sarah Morrison were the same person. Jake continued. "Sarah isn't just some computer programmer. She's the founder and CEO of one of the most sought-after consulting firms in the Midwest. The system she built for my company is already saving us over $200,000 annually in operational costs." The silence in the room was deafening. Emma had stopped crying and was staring at me with an expression of complete bewilderment. "That's impossible," Emma said flatly. "Sarah drives a Honda and lives in that tiny apartment. She can't even afford nice clothes for family dinners." Jake pulled up something on his phone and handed it to Dad. "This is the industry publication that featured Pinnacle Consulting as one of the top emerging firms in data analytics. The CEO profile is right there." Dad took the phone with shaking hands, and I watched his face change as he read. Mom leaned over to look, and her expression shifted from confusion to shock to something that might have been pride, or maybe just disbelief. "Sarah," Mom whispered, "is this real?" I looked around the table at my family, all of them staring at me like I was a stranger who had somehow infiltrated their dinner. Emma was gripping the edge of the table so hard her knuckles were white. Jake was watching me with an expression of patient encouragement, waiting for me to finally tell my truth. "Yes," I said quietly, "it's real." What followed was the most surreal 20 minutes of my life. Dad passed Jake's phone around the table, and I watched each family member read the article about Pinnacle Consulting's rapid growth and innovative approach to enterprise data solutions. The article included a professional headshot of me that had been taken for the company website, one where I looked confident, successful, and completely different from the quiet background daughter they thought they knew. Revenue projections for Pinnacle Consulting exceed $3 million for the current fiscal year. Uncle Tom read aloud, his voice filled with disbelief. The company has secured contracts with major corporations including automotive manufacturer Hartwell Industries, pharmaceutical giant Medcore Solutions, and retail chain Prestige Outlets. Emma was staring at me like I was some sort of alien creature. "I don't understand," she kept repeating. "How is this possible? When did this happen?" "It's been happening for 3 years," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I started taking freelance projects while working my day job, and it grew from there. Last year, I left Dataflow Solutions to focus on Pinnacle full-time." "But you never said anything," Mom said, and for the first time she sounded hurt rather than just confused. "Why wouldn't you tell us about this?" The question hung in the air, and I realized this was the moment I'd been unconsciously preparing for during 3 years of secret success. All the family dinners where my achievements were dismissed, all the conversations where Emma's minor accomplishments received more attention than my major ones, all the years of being treated like the family afterthought. It all led to this moment of truth. "Because you never asked," I said simply. "Because every time I tried to share anything about my work, you changed the subject or gave me polite nods before turning the conversation back to Emma. Because I learned early that my achievements weren't as interesting to this family as Emma's dating life or job drama." The words came out without the bitterness I thought they'd carry. Instead, they sounded matter-of-fact, which somehow made them hit harder. "That's not fair," Dad said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Isn't it?" Jake interjected, and everyone turned to look at him. "I've been to 4 family dinners, and every single time, Sarah would mention some significant professional accomplishment, usually something that would be front-page news in her industry, and it would be dismissed in favor of discussing Emma's social life or minor work updates." Emma finally found her voice again, and when she spoke, it was with the fury of someone whose worldview had just been completely upended. "So what, Sarah? You've been lying to us for 3 years? Pretending to be poor while you're secretly some big shot? What kind of person does that?" "The kind of person who got tired of being invisible," I replied. "The kind of person who learned that it was easier to succeed quietly than to constantly fight for recognition in a family that had already decided who the important one was." "That's ridiculous," Emma snapped. "We would have been happy for you. We would have celebrated your success." "Would you?" I asked, and the question was genuine. Because when I got my first $50,000 contract, I tried to share that news at Sunday dinner. Mom told me it was nice, and immediately asked Emma about her new haircut. When I was featured in Tech Weekly magazine, I brought a copy to show Dad. He flipped through it politely and handed it back without comment, then spent 20 minutes asking Emma about her part-time retail job. The examples poured out of me. 3 years worth of small dismissals and redirected conversations that had trained me to keep my successes to myself. With each specific instance I mentioned, I watched my family's expressions change. They were remembering those moments, seeing them through a different lens. "We didn't know it was important to you," Mom said weakly. "Everything Emma does is important to you," I replied. Her job at the boutique, her relationships, her social plans, her opinions about movies and restaurants and vacation destinations. You hang on every word when she talks about her life, but when I talk about mine, you're polite and distracted. Jake was nodding as I spoke. "Sarah, tell them about the Peterson Industries project." I looked at him in surprise. The Peterson Industries project was one of my biggest successes, a complete digital transformation for a manufacturing company that had resulted in a 40% increase in their operational efficiency. It was the kind of project that consulting firms 3 times the size of Pinnacle would compete for. Last month, Sarah designed and implemented a system that revolutionized how Peterson Industries manages their entire supply chain, Jake said when I hesitated. The CEO called it the most impactful business transformation they'd experienced in 20 years. Sarah's work is directly responsible for saving jobs and increasing profits by millions of dollars annually. Emma was looking back and forth between Jake and me like she was watching a tennis match. "Stop," she said finally. "Just stop. This is insane. Even if all of this is true, it doesn't change the fact that Jake came here to propose to me, and now he's declaring his love for my sister at what was supposed to be our engagement dinner." She was right, of course. The professional revelations, while dramatic, didn't address the immediate crisis that had precipitated this entire scene. Jake had come here planning to propose to Emma, and instead, he'd essentially ended their relationship in the most public way possible. "Emma," Jake said, turning to face her directly, "I owe you a sincere apology. The way I handled this was wrong, and you deserve better than having your relationship ended in front of your entire family." "Then why did you do it?" Emma asked, and for the first time since this all began, she sounded genuinely hurt rather than just angry. Jake was quiet for a long moment, and when he finally spoke, his words were careful and thoughtful. "Because I realized that I was planning to propose to the person I thought I should be with, rather than the person I actually wanted to build a life with. And I realized that living that lie would have been unfair to both of us." What Jake said next was perhaps the most difficult part of the entire evening for everyone to hear, because it forced us all to confront some uncomfortable truths about our family dynamics. "Emma, you're a lovely person with many wonderful qualities," Jake continued. "You're charming and social and fun to be around. But over the past few months, I've realized that we don't actually have that much in common beyond surface-level attraction." Emma's face flushed red. "Surface level? We've been together for 8 months." "I know," Jake said. "And I kept waiting for a deeper connection to develop. I kept thinking that if I just gave it more time, we'd find that intellectual and emotional compatibility that makes relationships last long-term." He glanced at me before continuing. "But then I started having conversations with Sarah, and I realized what I'd been looking for was right there. Someone who challenges me to think differently, who shares my curiosity about the world, who has built something meaningful with her life." "I've built something meaningful too," Emma protested. "I have my job, my friends, my life." "You do," Jake agreed. "And those things have value. But Emma, be honest. What do we actually talk about when we're together? What do we do besides go to restaurants and watch movies and attend social events?" The question hung in the air, and I could see Emma struggling to answer it. The truth was that her relationship with Jake had been largely social. They looked good together. They had fun together. But I'm not sure they'd ever had a conversation about their values, their goals, or their deeper thoughts about life. This was the moment when I realized something that probably should have been obvious earlier. Jake hadn't just fallen for me despite my family's dismissal of me. He'd fallen for me because of the contrast between who I actually was and how I was perceived by them. My hidden success story wasn't just impressive on its own. It was compelling because it revealed depth and authenticity that he wasn't finding elsewhere. "Jake," I said quietly, "I think we need to talk about this privately. This isn't fair to Emma or to my family." "No," Emma said sharply. "I want to hear this. I want to understand how my own sister managed to steal my fiancé without me even knowing she was trying." "I wasn't trying," I said firmly. "I never encouraged Jake's feelings, and I never acted on my own." "Your own?" Emma's voice was dangerously quiet. "So you admit you have feelings for him too?" It was a direct question, asked in front of my entire family, and I realized that this conversation had moved far beyond the point where diplomatic half-truths would work. Everyone was looking at me, waiting for an answer that would either make this situation infinitely worse or finally clear the air completely. "Yes," I said. "I have feelings for Jake, but I never would have acted on them while he was with you." Emma laughed, but it was a bitter sound. How noble of you, the secret millionaire with a heart of gold. Emma, Dad interjected. That's enough. No, it's not enough, Emma exploded. Do you all realize what just happened here? I brought my boyfriend home to propose to me, and instead, he announced that he's in love with Sarah. Sarah, who has apparently been lying to us for years about who she is and what she does. I wasn't lying, I said. I was just selective about what I shared. That's the same thing. No, it's not. The voice came from Mom, surprising everyone. She was looking at me with an expression I'd never seen before, something that combined regret, pride, and understanding. Emma, honey, lying would have been if Sarah made up stories about her life. What she did was, she protected herself. Mom's words hit me like a physical blow because they meant she understood. She finally saw the family dynamic that had driven me to succeed in secret rather than risk continued dismissal. Protected herself from what? Emma demanded. From us, Mom said quietly, from our inability to see her clearly. The room went completely silent. This wasn't just about Jake anymore, or even about my hidden success. This was about years of family patterns that everyone was finally being forced to examine. Dad cleared his throat. Sarah, I think we owe you an apology. Several apologies, actually. You don't need to, I started, but he held up a hand. Yes, we do. Because you're right. We haven't been paying attention to your life the way we should have. We haven't celebrated your achievements or even bothered to understand what you do for work. And apparently, we've created a family environment where you felt like you had to hide success rather than share it. I felt tears starting to form, which surprised me. I'd expected this conversation to be angry or dramatic, but I hadn't expected this moment of genuine acknowledgement from my parents. I'm proud of you, Dad continued. I'm proud of what you've built, and I'm ashamed that you didn't feel like you could share it with us. Emma was staring at our father like he'd suddenly started speaking a foreign language. So that's it? Sarah gets to be the victim here? She gets to be the misunderstood genius who was just too good for our family? That's not what anyone is saying, Mom replied. But Emma, can you honestly tell me that you've ever asked Sarah detailed questions about her work? Or really listened when she tried to share her achievements with us? Emma opened her mouth to respond, then closed it again. I could see her running through memories, trying to find examples to contradict Mom's point. This is unbelievable, Emma finally said. My entire family is taking Sarah's side after she stole my boyfriend. I didn't steal him, I said, and I was surprised by how calm my voice sounded. Jake made his own choice based on his own feelings. I'm not responsible for his decision. But you're happy about it, Emma accused. Don't pretend you're not thrilled that this worked out for you. She was right, and we both knew it. Despite the chaos and the hurt feelings and the terrible timing, I was happy. For the first time in my adult life, I felt truly seen and valued by someone in my family's presence. For the first time, my achievements were being recognized and celebrated rather than dismissed or ignored. Yes, I admitted, I am happy. Not about the way it happened, and not about the pain it's causing you. But I'm happy that someone finally sees who I really am. The dinner party, such as it was, ended shortly after that. Extended family members made awkward excuses and left quickly, unsure how to process what they'd witnessed. Uncle Tom shook my hand on his way out and said, "Congratulations on your success, Sarah. I had no idea." Aunt Linda hugged me and whispered, "I'm proud of you, honey." Emma left without saying goodbye to anyone, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows. Jake lingered for a few minutes, clearly wanting to talk to me privately, but I asked him to give me some time to process everything that had happened. I meant what I said, he told me quietly as he was leaving. About my feelings, and about wanting to build something real with you. but I know this timing is terrible, and I know you need space. After everyone left, I sat in my parents' living room with Mom and Dad, all of us trying to make sense of what had just occurred. The birthday cake, store-bought chocolate, my favorite since childhood, sat untouched on the dining room table, a surreal reminder of how this evening was supposed to have gone. "I'm sorry," Mom said finally. "Sarah, I'm so sorry that we made you feel like you couldn't share your success with us." "I'm sorry too," Dad added. "And I'm sorry that it took tonight for us to realize how we've been treating you." Their apologies felt genuine, but they also opened up 3 years' worth of buried resentment that I hadn't fully acknowledged even to myself. It wasn't just about the professional dismissals, it was about feeling like a supporting character in my own family's story. "I need you both to understand something," I said. "This isn't just about work achievements. It's about feeling like you've never been curious about who I am as a person. Emma's interests, opinions, and experiences have always been central to family conversations. Mine have been peripheral at best." Mom was crying now, which was something I rarely saw. "We didn't realize we were doing that." "I know," I said, "and I don't think it was intentional. But the impact was real, regardless of the intention." We talked for another hour, and it was the most honest conversation I'd ever had with my parents. They asked questions about my business, my clients, my plans for the future. They wanted to understand not just what I did, but why I was passionate about it and what my goals were. For the first time in years, I felt like they were genuinely interested in my life rather than just being polite. But even as we were rebuilding our relationship, I knew that Emma and I faced a much more complicated situation. The Jake issue aside, she was going to have to reconcile her image of me as the unremarkable older sister with the reality of who I'd become professionally. And I was going to have to figure out how to have a relationship with someone who had spent years unconsciously diminishing me. The next few weeks were intense and complicated. Emma wasn't speaking to me or our parents, which created a difficult dynamic for everyone. She'd moved in temporarily with her best friend and was, according to mutual acquaintances, telling everyone who would listen that I'd deliberately sabotaged her relationship. Jake called me 3 days after the dinner disaster. "Sarah, I know this timing is terrible, but I need to see you. Not for a date or anything romantic, just to talk through what happened and what it means going forward." We met at a coffee shop downtown, far from anywhere we might run into family or mutual acquaintances. Jake looked exhausted, and I probably didn't look much better. "First," he said, "I need to apologize for how I handled that situation. Emma deserved better than having her relationship ended in front of her entire family. There were 100 ways I could have managed that more thoughtfully." "Why did you do it that way?" I asked. "Why didn't you just break up with her privately first?" Jake was quiet for a long moment. "Because I was a coward," he said finally. "I'd been struggling with my feelings for weeks, but I couldn't bring myself to end things with Emma because I wasn't sure how you felt about me. I was terrified that I'd blow up my relationship for someone who might not be interested." "So, you decided to find out in the most dramatic way possible?" "I know how it sounds," Jake said. "But when I saw that article about Pinnacle Consulting and realized the connection, everything clicked into place. It wasn't just that I had feelings for you, it was that you were this extraordinary person hiding in plain sight, and your own family didn't even see it." He leaned forward, his expression intense. "Sarah, do you realize how remarkable you are? You built a multi-million-dollar consulting firm while working full-time for someone else. You're revolutionizing how major corporations handle their data infrastructure. You're operating at a level that most people never reach, and you've done it with no fanfare, no recognition, no support system." "I had a support system," I said, "just not from my family." "Right. Which makes it even more impressive, and which also made me realize that if I could be with someone like that, Someone with that combination of brilliance, integrity, and quiet strength. I'd be an idiot to settle for a relationship based on surface compatibility. I understood what he was saying, and I appreciated his honesty, but I also needed him to understand the position this put me in with my family. Jake, even if we pursue this, it's going to be complicated. Emma is never going to forgive me. My family is going to think I orchestrated this somehow. And honestly, I'm not sure I'm ready for a relationship that started under these circumstances. I know, he said, and I'm willing to wait. I'm willing to give you whatever time you need to figure out what you want. But Sarah, I also need you to know that this isn't some impulsive decision based on discovering your professional success. I've been falling for you for months. Your intelligence, your perspective, your authenticity. The business stuff just confirmed what I already knew about your character. What followed was the most transformative period of my adult life. For the first time, I was living authentically across all areas of my life, professional, personal, and familial. It was liberating, but also challenging in ways I hadn't anticipated. Professionally, the exposure from that chaotic dinner party actually led to unexpected opportunities. Word spread through industry networks that the mysterious founder of Pinnacle Consulting was a young woman who'd built her company from nothing while working other jobs. I started receiving speaking invitations and interview requests from business publications. More importantly, I realized that hiding my success had been limiting my business growth. When you're trying to maintain a facade of struggle, you can't network effectively, invest in proper office space, or position yourself as the expert you actually are. Within a month of coming out professionally, I'd signed 2 new major contracts and hired my first full-time employee. My relationship with my parents continued to improve as well. They made genuine efforts to understand my work and to treat my achievements with the respect they deserved. Dad started reading industry publications to better understand my field, and Mom began mentioning my successes to friends and relatives with obvious pride. But they were also processing their own guilt about the years of inadvertent dismissal. I keep thinking about all the times you tried to share your accomplishments with us, Mom said during one of our weekly dinners. How many important moments did we miss because we weren't paying attention? The important thing is that you're paying attention now, I told her, and I meant it. Resentment is exhausting to maintain, and I'd rather have an authentic relationship going forward than continue relitigating the past. Emma remained a more complicated situation. She eventually started speaking to our parents again, but she was still furious with me. According to Mom, she was struggling with having her entire worldview about our family dynamics challenged. Emma had grown up as the center of attention, and learning that I'd achieved significant success while she wasn't looking had shaken her sense of self in ways that went beyond the Jake situation. She's always seen herself as the successful one, Mom explained. The one with the social skills and the bright future. Finding out that you've already built the kind of life she's been dreaming about. It's forcing her to reconsider everything. I felt sympathy. For Emma's situation, even though I was still hurt by her accusation that I deliberately sabotaged her relationship. The truth was that our family's golden child dynamic had been limiting for both of us. It had made me invisible, but it had also put enormous pressure on her to be constantly impressive and entertaining. 3 weeks after the dinner incident, Emma texted me, "We need to talk." Emma and I met at a neutral location, the botanical gardens where we'd spent time together as children. It felt symbolic somehow to have this conversation in a place that held memories of when our relationship was simpler. She looked different, less polished than usual, more thoughtful. The brittleness that had characterized her demeanor over the past few weeks seemed to have softened into something more genuine. "I've been talking to a therapist," she said without preamble, "about the family stuff, about Jake, about everything." I waited for her to continue. She helped me realize some things that are hard to admit, Emma went on, about how I've been treating you, and about why I was so angry about the Jake situation. What did you realize? Emma took a deep breath. That I was never really in love with Jake. I was in love with the idea of him, with having a successful, attractive boyfriend who looked good with me and made me feel important. But you're right that we never talked about anything meaningful. We never challenged each other or shared our real thoughts about anything that mattered. This was more self-awareness than I'd ever heard from Emma, and I wasn't sure how to respond. The therapist asked me to think about what I actually knew about Jake's goals, his values, his dreams for the future, Emma continued. And I realized I couldn't answer those questions. I could tell you what restaurants he liked and what movies he preferred, but I didn't know what he cared about. Emma, I started, but she held up a hand. Let me finish. Because the hard part isn't admitting that Jake and I weren't right for each other. The hard part is admitting that I was so angry with you not because you stole my boyfriend, but because you made me realize that I'm not who I thought I was. I frowned. What do you mean? I mean, I've spent my whole life thinking I was the successful one, the impressive one, the one with the bright future. And then I find out that while I was working part-time retail and going to brunch with friends, you were building $1 million business. While I was focused on my social life and relationships, you were becoming an expert in your field and working with Fortune 500 companies. Emma's voice was shaking slightly. Do you know what that feels like? To realize that everything you thought about yourself and your family was wrong. Actually, I said gently, I do know what that feels like. Because I spent years believing that my achievements didn't matter to this family, that I wasn't worth paying attention to, that Emma's life was inherently more interesting and valuable than mine. Emma stared at me for a moment and I saw recognition dawn in her eyes. We both got screwed by the same family dynamic, didn't we? Yeah, I said, I think we did. What followed was the most honest conversation Emma and I had ever had. We talked about how the family's treatment of us had shaped our self-perceptions and our relationship with each other. We talked about the pressure Emma felt to be constantly entertaining and socially successful, and the invisibility I'd experienced when I didn't fit that mold. I'm sorry, Emma said finally, for years of not really seeing you, for not asking about your work or your goals or your life, for making you feel like you had to hide your success instead of celebrate it. I'm sorry too, I replied, for not trying harder to connect with you, for assuming you wouldn't be interested in my life, for keeping such a big part of myself secret. It wasn't a magical reconciliation that solved everything immediately, but it was a start. We agreed to work on building a more authentic relationship going forward, one based on who we actually were rather than the roles we'd been playing in the family dynamic. Jake and I started dating officially 6 weeks after the disaster dinner, and it was unlike any relationship I'd ever experienced. We could talk for hours about technology, business strategy, social issues, or random philosophical questions. He understood my work not just intellectually, but viscerally. He got excited about elegant code solutions the way some people get excited about sports. More importantly, he saw me completely. Not just the successful businesswoman I'd become, but also the insecure younger sister who'd spent years feeling invisible. He understood why I'd hidden my achievements, but he also encouraged me to step into my success more fully. You're allowed to be proud of what you've built, he told me one evening as we were reviewing the plans for Pinnacle's new office space. You're allowed to take up space and be recognized for your achievements. Learning to do that, to be fully myself in all contexts, was an ongoing process. I'd spent so many years downplaying my success that it felt unnatural to discuss it openly. But gradually, I began sharing my professional wins with friends and family, networking more actively, and positioning myself as the expert I'd become. The business growth that resulted was dramatic. Within 6 months, Pinnacle Consulting had expanded to 8 employees and was fielding more contract opportunities than we could handle. I was invited to speak at major industry conferences and was featured on the cover of Midwest Business Magazine as one of the region's most innovative young entrepreneurs. But perhaps more meaningful than the professional recognition was the shift in my family relationships. Mom and Dad started including my work updates in their conversations with friends and relatives. They asked thoughtful questions about my projects and celebrated my successes with genuine enthusiasm. When I won a regional business award, they attended the ceremony and brought flowers. Emma and I continued rebuilding our relationship slowly. She started asking about my work, and I made efforts to engage with her interests and goals. We discovered that we both loved hiking, something we'd never done together as adults, and started taking weekend trips to state parks. It was during one of those hikes that she told me she'd decided to go back to school for her MBA. "Watching you build Pinnacle made me realize that I've been drifting," she said, as we stopped to rest at a scenic overlook. "I've been waiting for my life to happen to me instead of creating it actively. I want to build something meaningful too." A year later, I hosted my 33rd birthday party at my new house, a beautiful colonial in the suburbs that served as both a symbol of my success and a space large enough to accommodate the life I was building. The guest list included my family, Jake, my Pinnacle employees, and several industry colleagues who'd become genuine friends. Emma came with her new boyfriend, David, whom she'd met in her MBA program. David was quieter than her usual type, but I could see they had the kind of intellectual connection that had been missing from her relationship with Jake. When she introduced him to the group, she talked knowledgeably about his research in sustainable business practices, and he spoke admiringly about her coursework in organizational psychology. During the party, I found myself reflecting on how much had changed since that chaotic dinner a year earlier. I was living in a house I loved, with a man who saw and appreciated all of me, running a business that challenged and fulfilled me, and maintaining relationships with family members who finally understood who I was. But perhaps the most significant change was internal. I no longer felt the need to hide my success or minimize my achievements to make others comfortable. I'd learned that authentic relationships require authenticity from both parties, and that people who are threatened by your success probably aren't the right people to have in your inner circle anyway. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, Jake found me in the kitchen cleaning up. "How does it feel?" he asked, "having a birthday party where you don't have to pretend to be someone you're not?" "Incredible," I said, and I meant it. "It feels like finally coming home to myself." Emma was one of the last to leave, and as she was gathering her things, she pulled me aside. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For forcing all of us to be more honest about who we are, about what we want, about how we treat each other. I know the way it happened was messy, but I'm grateful for where it led." She paused, then added, "And I'm grateful that you didn't let us keep diminishing you. You deserved better, and I'm glad you finally demanded it." The story of my hidden success and its dramatic revelation spread beyond my immediate family and social circle, largely due to the business media coverage Pinnacle was receiving. I was invited to speak at conferences not just about data consulting, but about entrepreneurship, family dynamics, and the challenges of succeeding while female in male-dominated industries. One of the most meaningful speaking opportunities came when Northwestern University's business school invited me to address their graduating class. The theme of my talk was "The Power of Authentic Success." The idea that hiding your achievements to make others comfortable ultimately limits both your personal growth and your professional impact. "Many of you will face pressure to downplay your accomplishments," I told the graduates, "from family members who feel threatened by your success, from colleagues who prefer you to remain in supporting roles, from social dynamics that reward modesty over confidence. But I want you to understand that when you hide your light to make others comfortable, you're not just limiting yourself, you're robbing the world of your full contribution. The response was overwhelming. Students and faculty approached me afterward to share their own stories of hidden achievements, family dismissal, and the challenge of being authentic in environments that didn't value their true selves. One young woman, about to graduate with a double major in computer science and business, told me, "My family still introduces me as the daughter who's good with computers, like it's a cute hobby instead of a serious career path. Your story gives me hope that I can build something meaningful even if they don't understand it yet." These conversations reinforced my belief that my experience wasn't unique. There are countless people, especially women and minorities, who are building remarkable careers and achievements while receiving little recognition or support from their families or social circles. As Pinnacle Consulting continued to grow, I realized that my story of hidden success was actually a competitive advantage in the business world. Clients were drawn to the narrative of the quiet genius who'd built something extraordinary without fanfare. It suggested authenticity, substance over style, and results over self-promotion. But more importantly, my experience of being overlooked and underestimated had given me unique insights into organizational dynamics and human potential. I began incorporating these perspectives into my consulting work, helping companies identify and develop talent that might be hidden in plain sight. One of my favorite projects involved working with a manufacturing company that was struggling with innovation and efficiency. During my analysis, I discovered that many of their best ideas for process improvements were coming from floor-level employees whose suggestions were being ignored by management. "You have extraordinary talent in this organization," I told the CEO during my final presentation. "But your current structure is designed to listen only to voices from the top of the hierarchy. The people actually doing the work often have the best insights about how to improve it." We implemented a system for capturing and evaluating suggestions from employees at all levels, and within 6 months, the company had improved their operational efficiency by 35% while reducing costs by $8 million annually. The success of this project led to similar work with other organizations, and hidden talent identification became one of Pinnacle's specialty services. The irony wasn't lost on me that my experience of being professionally invisible had become the foundation for helping others become visible and valued in their workplaces. Jake and I got engaged on the 2-year anniversary of that chaotic birthday dinner. He proposed in the same botanical gardens where Emma and I had our reconciliation conversation, which felt symbolically perfect, a place where important truths had been spoken and relationships had been rebuilt. "I love that we found each other in the midst of your family's chaos," he said as he got down on one knee. "But I love even more who you've become since then. Watching you step into your success fully and authentically has been incredible." Our wedding was small and focused on the relationships that truly mattered to us. Emma served as my maid of honor, something that would have been unimaginable 2 years earlier. In her speech, she talked about how our relationship had evolved and deepened once we'd moved beyond the superficial roles we'd been playing. "Sarah taught me that being authentic is more important than being comfortable," Emma said to the assembled guests. "She showed me that it's better to be truly seen by a few people than to be admired by many people who don't actually know who you are." Emma had graduated with her MBA and was now working for a nonprofit focused on organizational development and workplace equity. She'd found a way to combine her natural people skills with more substantive work, and she was thriving in an environment that valued both her emotional intelligence and her analytical capabilities. Our parents had also continued to evolve. They'd started volunteering with a local mentorship program for young entrepreneurs, using their experience of initially missing their daughter's success as a cautionary tale about the importance of really listening to and supporting the young people in their lives. We learned the hard way that support looks different for different people, Mom told me. Emma needed encouragement and social connection. You needed recognition and intellectual respect. We gave you both the same thing, and that didn't serve either of you well. Perhaps the most unexpected outcome of my story was the way it began influencing other families and individuals who heard it. The speaking, engagements, media interviews, and word-of-mouth sharing had created a ripple effect of people examining their own family dynamics and professional authenticity. I started receiving emails from people across the country, sharing their own stories of hidden success, family dismissal, and the challenge of being seen for who they truly were. A software engineer in Seattle wrote about building a successful app development business while her family continued to ask when she was going to get a real job. A doctor in Atlanta described how her family still introduced her as the daughter who's single, rather than mentioning her medical achievements. But I also heard from family members who'd recognized themselves in my story and wanted to do better. A father in Denver wrote about realizing he'd been dismissing his son's passion for sustainable agriculture because it didn't fit his vision of traditional success. A mother in Miami described having difficult but necessary conversations with her daughters about which one she'd been unconsciously favoring. These responses reinforced my belief that my experience was part of a much larger cultural pattern. Families, organizations, and social systems often struggle to see and value types of success that don't fit their expectations or comfort zones. 3 years after the Revelation dinner, Pinnacle Consulting had grown into a regional powerhouse with 23 employees and offices in 3 cities. But more importantly, we'd developed a reputation for creating inclusive, supportive work environments where people could be authentic and successful simultaneously. I'd also started a scholarship program for first-generation college students pursuing STEM degrees, particularly those whose families didn't understand or support their career choices. The scholarship provided not just financial assistance, but also mentorship and networking opportunities to help these students build the professional support systems their families couldn't provide. I want to make sure no one has to choose between family acceptance and professional authenticity, I explained to the scholarship committee. Everyone deserves to have their achievements recognized and celebrated. The first scholarship recipient was Maria, a computer science student whose immigrant parents wanted her to become a doctor because they didn't understand what programmers did or why it was valuable. By the time she graduated, we'd not only supported her education, but had also helped her parents understand the significance and potential of her chosen field. My parents came to my graduation, Maria told me at the scholarship celebration. And for the first time, they introduced me to their friends as our daughter, the software engineer, with pride instead of confusion. As I sit here today, reflecting on the journey from that chaotic birthday dinner to where I am now, I'm struck by how much can change when you decide to stop hiding who you really are. The revelation of my professional success was dramatic and painful, but it was also necessary, not just for me, but for my entire family. We had all been trapped in roles that served no one. Emma felt pressure to be constantly entertaining and socially successful. I felt compelled to remain invisible to avoid threatening the family dynamic. Our parents were missing out on really knowing their daughters because they were too focused on maintaining the established hierarchy. The truth is, my sister announcing her engagement at my birthday party was just the catalyst. The real transformation happened when we all decided to have honest conversations about who we were, what we wanted, and how we could support each other authentically. Jake and I are now happily married and running Pinnacle Consulting together. He handles business development while I focus on technical innovation and client strategy. Emma and David got married last spring, and she's considering starting her own consulting firm focused on organizational psychology. Our parents have become our biggest supporters, and they've learned to celebrate different types of success in different ways. But perhaps the most important lesson I've learned is that success without authenticity is ultimately hollow. For 3 years, I built an impressive business while feeling fundamentally unseen by the people closest to me. The professional achievements were meaningful, but they couldn't fill the void left by family relationships that weren't based on who I actually was. When people ask me about that infamous dinner party now, I tell them it was the best worst birthday I ever had. It was painful and dramatic and messy, but it forced all of us to stop pretending and start being real with each other. I think about the young woman I was 3 years ago, successful but hidden, accomplished but unrecognized, building something amazing while feeling fundamentally invisible. I wish I could tell her that she deserved to be seen and celebrated, that her achievements mattered, and that the people who truly loved her would learn to appreciate who she really was. But I also understand why she kept her success secret. It felt safer to succeed quietly than to risk continued dismissal. It felt easier to be invisible than to fight for recognition that might never come. Sometimes we protect ourselves in ways that also limit us, and it takes courage to risk being fully seen. The story I've shared with you today isn't just about family drama or workplace success or romantic relationships. It's about the courage it takes to be authentically yourself, even when that authenticity challenges other people's comfort zones or expectations. If you're hiding your achievements, your talents, or your true self to make others comfortable, I want you to know that you deserve better. You deserve to be seen and celebrated for who you really are. And the people who truly love you will learn to appreciate your authentic self, even if it takes them some time to adjust. The world needs your full contribution, not the diminished version you might be offering to keep the peace. Your talents matter. Your achievements matter. You matter. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and let me know in the comments. Have you ever felt like you had to hide your success or talents from your family? What would you have done in my situation at that birthday dinner? I love reading your stories and connecting with people who've faced similar challenges. And if you know someone who might benefit from hearing this story, someone who's been hiding their light to make others comfortable, please share this video with them. Subscribe to this channel for more stories about finding your authentic self, building meaningful success, and navigating complex family relationships. I post new content every week, and I read every single comment. Remember, you don't have to choose between being successful and being loved. The right people will celebrate both your achievements and your authentic self. Sometimes it just takes time for them to learn how. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next video.